Hey, so this is for those of you looking to get into D&D, um, and maybe you don't know where to start at all. I just wanted to take the opportunity to go over some of the races and classes because, in my opinion, when you are starting out, before you even learn all the rules and everything, one of the first things you want to do is have in mind what kind of a game you want to play. And that might be based off of what kind of character you are, because at the heart of it, D&D is a cooperative storytelling experience. So your dungeon master will create a story, um, or not a story necessarily, but beats, events, NPCs, things for you to interact with. And as players, your job is to embody and create this immersive character that you want to be, and it can be whatever you want it to be. You'll discuss that with your DM. But you should have something in mind before you even start learning a lot of the rules. You want to know what you plan to play, and that will be um, the easiest way to pick out what rules you're most going to need other than the basic stuff like your turn orders and things. And it's going to give your DM a really good idea of probably the type of game you want to play based on what the party makeup is. So, and I base most of my information off of 5e and the basic player handbook, and then there's like two other classes I'll touch on as well, just because I have a little bit of knowledge of them, but I don't have a lot of the other resources with me. So first, I would mention in alphabetical order here is the barbarian as your class. A barbarian class is going to be somebody whose main stat is their strength. They run around and they hit things very quickly, and one of their main features is rage. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an angry person. You could be a happy-go-lucky person who's got a little bit of mania, and you switch to a rage and start swinging at things. Or you could be an angry hillsman. A lot of times people are Goliaths or big, hefty, strong characters that go with this, but you can mix it up. You can be a small person that's just really mighty. But their biggest thing, they don't really get spell casting, but they do a lot of big damage in their hits, and they have some damage reduction, so they make pretty good tanks. Next up would be a bard. Bards are actually one of my personal favorites. And you may think of a bard as always musical. It does not have to be musical. Bards have some magical capabilities. They're either half or quarter casters, but so they can do some stuff. They get some options for some illusion magic, a little bit of offensive magic is on the table, a little bit of healing magic is on the table. But their big thing, their magic source, is from inspiration. So basically you tell stories, or you act, or you sing, or you do things that are inspiring. You're very skillful, you're very good at things, and so this character would be somebody whose magic comes from their ability to do things really well. So, I mean, if they were to cast Minor Illusion, you could say it as, like you tell the stories so fantastically that you're able to see things. It's kind of like, it's still magic, but most of all these classes are going to get their magic from somewhere. Something is kind of the source. And for bards, it's their ability to entertain. And these can be, sneaky bards that are like pickpocketing as they slide by. You have the bard in The Witcher, is probably a pretty good example of a bard. I think pretty much every classic group of people in most shows has some kind of a bard. The funny character, a lot of times, The bards, they have a little bit of healing. They're usually pretty good at their charisma stuff. Because it's all about the performance that you're putting on. And then after the bard, I believe we have cleric. Clerics are Um, Traditionally, we view them as healers. They usually have the most amount of healing magic, and their magic comes usually from their religion. They're like the uh, battle doctors for their gods. And you can play it in a number of ways. It doesn't always have to be a good guy. A lot of clerics traditionally are the good guys that fight for their god and go out and heal people, and they usually have a good alignment. But they definitely have options for if you serve a dark god. I think they have some necromantic options, but they're typically the healers of the party. They do a lot of healing. They have some combat bonuses, but their thing is typically a good guy, but you can play it how you want. There's so much leeway in all the options. And next up is the druid. Druid is another one of my favorites. I enjoy them because they have a special attachment to animals. Druids are going to be your hippie type ish, they could be anything. They could be anything. But their magic comes from plants and animals. They are one with nature in that way. Specifically with nature. They get some healing options, but a lot of their magic is going to be centered around what they can do with plants and animals. So shooting up vines from the ground to hold someone still to give advantage or to keep them from moving. So they have, not as much availability to move, or they have to break the vines to move. Things like that. There's a couple of spells for things like that. They have the Shaligo, which is like a thorn whip that you can magically summon. They'll get things like being able to summon animals or speak with plants. So if you are going through the woods, you're searching for somebody or you're looking for something, you might be able to ask the animals about it. And then they're also their main feature, but one of the coolest things about them is their wild shape abilities, which is going to change a little bit based on your subclasses because everything's going to have a different subclass. But you're able to turn into fish and birds and bears, dogs, bigger creatures, giant spiders, based on as you level up, you get better at shifting, and you're able to turn into more things and stronger things. But it gives you a nice health bonus, and it allows you to do a lot more stuff. So if you need like an aerial view, I've reached a level I can be a bird now. You can turn into things. I find it to be very useful if you're not a big person that likes to collect pets. Maybe not, but I think it's really fun. I think there's a lot you can do with it. It's one of my favorites. Next up is Fighter. So Fighter's another one, like the Barbarian. They're not casters. They don't have as much magic. But like a Barbarian runs in and they're hitting things and they're less technique and more manpower. Fighters are more about their techniques. So you're gonna choose between like whether you're really good at wearing armor, so you'll get like an armor bonus, or if you're a really good archer, or if you choose, I usually choose the maneuvers subclass, but you can do any number of things. Basically, these are the guys that have been trained soldiers, or they come from like noble classes where they've been properly taught, so they have a lot of technique to their fighting, and that's the main thing for the class. And then you can do a lot of stuff with this. Just because you're a fighter doesn't mean you always have to be about fighting. Just because you're a barbarian doesn't mean you always have to be about fighting. But that's kind of what they do. Most of their stuff is going to be combat oriented specifically, and they make pretty good tanks, but they're a little bit flexible on whether you want to be a straight tank or if you want to be able to hit and run. You're going to be able to do things like that. And then you have monks. Like the druid is in tune with nature and trees and animals. The monks are in tune with the universe. So they have they don't really have a casting ability per se, but the source of, so they're the ones. I mean, they are. You kind. I think everybody kind of knows what a monk is naturally, but they're the ones that are. They're precise, but unlike fighters where they're armored and decked out and using weapons, they are super fast and precise with their hands and feet. They are one-on-one combat. And the idea is that they're kind of in tune with the universe. They get a power called ki that allows them to channel the energy around them to move very effectively. And that does make their unarmed strikes considered magical. So although they're not really casting spells, when you get into combat situations where need to fight something using magical weapons because it's a magical creature, their bare fists count as that. So with fighters, they don't have that. Fighters do get some special abilities. They get their own set of dice, superiority die, because they're so good at things. But they don't get the magic that monks do. So yeah, monks are in tune with the universe. They are using ki and just punching and knocking things out. So you can make them however you want, good, good, bad, but and there's going to be a lot of subclass options for all of these. That's what monks are doing. They're out there just kung fu, jujitsu. Those are monks, martial artists. Next we have paladins. So paladins are similar to clerics in that they get some casting ability, but and it's also from a god, and it's kind of a religious thing. Clerics are usually like religious. Paladins usually get it from a god, and but they're more military, way more military. They are more tanky, more buffed out, and they you can be a vengeance paladin, where you're just on this righteous path. Basically, you can be a crusader. In that kind of way, whereas a cleric might travel around with you and heal the local people and be good at defending themselves. They defend the weak and the small, but paladins are typically more, just they've got the buffness to them in their aesthetic. You can also be an oathbreaker. You don't have to. So a lot of people are like, paladins, we are rightness and nothing else, just the truth, just the rightness. But you don't have to be that way. There's a big joke about paladins being that way, but you don't have to be that way. You can be a vengeance paladin, or you can be an oathbreaker paladin even. So specifically, if you don't want to play with like a religious thing or whatever in your game, if you don't want to be like, my god says, you can also be an oathbreaker. And then there's tons of other options as well, but they're typically like a religious-based heavy tank. At least that's how I see them. And next up we have rangers. So again, like your druid, rangers draw out a lot of their abilities from nature. But instead of specifically like a nature preservation, these guys are, I think they have some casting ability, but instead of turning into animals, they work with animals, and their higher skill is tracking. So a druid can't use like meta weapons and stuff. They are one with nature. Rangers are not one with it, but they work with it. So these are going to be your hunters and trappers and trackers. They're going to be the people out there. A lot of loners, a lot of people who like to play loners play rangers. I don't recommend playing a loner in a party unless you're a little bit more experienced. But these are the guys. They're tracking. They're also working with animals. They're not wild shaping as much. They do a lot of deck stuff. So they do a lot of ranged bows and arrows. Rangers. Because they're gonna be hunters. Next is a rogue. Rogues are dexterous. They have some subclass options for magic casting, but not all the subclasses get it. So you can have some little tricks and things that can help you as a rogue. But their bards and rogues are both skill heavy kind of characters. So bards get a lot of things called expertise. So the things that you're good at, you're a jack of all trades. If you were to, have to make a check about, can I tell if this is magical, or do I know this about the world, a history check, or if you're trying to tell a lie, you need to make a deception check, or if you're trying to convince someone to do what you want them to do, you need to make a persuasion check. If you are trying to find plants in the wilderness, you would do a nature check. Those skill checks are going to be things that the bards are going to have more of, and the rogues are usually going to have more of. Bards are like, here, face of the party. A lot of times the rogues are less so. They can be the face of the party. You can choose to make persuasion and things that you do not have to be a sneaky little pickpocket. You can also be, very good at deception, and so instead of being stealthy as in sneaking away, although most of your damage is going to come in sneak attack damage, but there's different things to that. I mean, you could be the advisor to the king who's really good at lying and doing things and occasionally take someone out very quietly. That's the rogue. Most traditionally, the people who are the thieves and the pickpockets, because they're typically have a lot of skills in that area. You can play them however you want. They're not normally very tanky, but they're quick and they're good at what they do. And that is a rogue. Next, we have sorcerers. So this is the first caster on the list that's like a full caster. And they are basically sorcerers cast. They do a lot of casting. But their magical power doesn't come from nature necessarily or your religion or whatever. Sorcerers' magic comes from themselves. So basically, you are born with this source of magic inside of you, and this could be wild magic, so the chaos of the universe. So when you cast spells, other things happen because you have chaotic power within you. This could be because of your draconic ancestry, so you could have like a source of dragon magic. You could have elemental magic in you, which would switch your spells towards storm magic or water magic or fire magic, things of that kind of nature. But they're going to have a lot of spells, and it's going to come from within them. So it's going to be a lot more natural for them to cast things. So your special abilities outside of casting are going to be later on getting sorcery points. Basically, you're so good at it and it's part of you. You're going to be able to either cast faster than other people, or cast further away, or pick an additional target, or cast carefully so you can choose that your spell doesn't touch your party members when normally fireball in a small room would hit everyone. Things like that. They're going to be naturally just much better at magic because it comes from within them. The exception being wild magic, where crazy things happen. But they're just sorcerers. Sorcerers are magic everywhere from inside themselves. This could be any type of character you want it to be, as all of them can be, but they're very varied in my experience with what I've seen with casters. Next up, we have warlocks. Warlocks are one of my favorites to DM. I find that they give me a lot of roleplay ability as the DM to give information, but to each his own. I enjoy them. Some people do, some people don't. They have a lot of cool powers. They are casters. Half casters, I think. And their power also comes from a higher entity, like a god or a dark god or something. So basically, you're going to make a pact of some kind with a higher being, with a fae, or with a god, or a genie, or something like that. And depending on the pact that you make and the type of pact, your deal with this entity is going to give you the type of spells that you get. So you would get like Eldritch Blast, basically, like your power shoots out just straight from the source. A lot of people choose Pact of the Blade, I believe. You get like a magical weapon that you can summon, so you get a whole bunch of stuff. And a lot of times these entities, I like the roleplay opportunity because these god entities, you work for them. you get this power because you've made a deal. They usually want something out of it. And sometimes that's not much of anything. Sometimes, it's a chaos god that's like, do what you want. But it can also lead to great role play opportunities if you have an actual kind of pact where you're supposed to be doing stuff. And I've watched some DMs, some players didn't follow like what they were doing and they had to switch packs and stuff. And it's very interesting because you could lose your powers and then do something else. So you work it out with your DM and whatever. But these guys get their magic from a deal that they make with a higher entity of some kind. And that's super flexible. All of your subclasses are going to be picking what kind of a deal you are making with what entity. And last in the book, at least, and there's two more I want to go over after that. Last in the book is the wizard. Wizards are also full casters. They are oftentimes considered glass cannons, meaning that they have no health and a lot of power. So they can output a whole bunch of damage, but you might hit them once and they die. That's kind of the joke. And that's not always true, and you level up with it. You can choose Constitution. You can play them however you want. These things are very flexible. But basically, wizards treat magic as a science. These are your Harry Potters, your Hermione Grangers, your School of Wizardry. That's the wizards. That's what School of Wizardry. Their magic comes from understanding how magic works. So they're going to have a lot of spell options. So basically they get a spell book and you learn some spells naturally, but this is going to give you more options to add to your magic. A lot of the other ones you have to pick your spells when you level or change out your spells. Like you get some wizards can go buy spell scrolls and add them to their books so they can continually increase their arsenal of available spells. Your spell slots, your casting power is still going to be limited by your level, but the amount that you can know is a lot more flexible. So they get a lot of spells. They are basically spend all their time learning. There's a lot of jokes about them being like, the broke artist because you spend money on your expensive paper and inks and stuff, but you get a lot of spells out of it. So a lot of fun here if you really want to be a caster, sorcerers and wizards. Great, fantastic. There's a lot of cool options, but they treat it like a science, basically. And the next one I wanted to go over isn't in this book, is the artificer or artificer, depending on who's saying it. And those are going to be this. When I said science for wizard, this is science. They are like steampunk scientists. Those are the artificers, and I also really enjoy them. They have some combat utility. They are partial casters. They're going to be another class that has a lot of skills, but their skills are going to be geared towards crafting, tool crafting. So, and most of their magic is based off of, like, if you were to shoot something out of your, shoot a fireball or something, a flavor text for that, for an artificer, might be that you have a small mechanism on your hand and it can shoot a fireball. That's your magic. But it's basically the magic of science. So they're going to get a lot of options like that, but they're going to be tinkerers and builders, and they get a lot of utility. So those are fun. And the last one I was just going to touch on, I know a little bit less about them, but I have had some experience to be like gunslingers. If you're playing in a steampunky type setting, some DMs don't want to have guns. They want to just do magic and things, but I'm usually pretty cool with it, so I'll include it with mine. Not cool with it, I'm okay with it. I enjoy steampunk. That's not everybody's cup of tea. But gunslingers are pretty much what the name entails. They are going to be kind of like a ranger with their range damage, except for that instead of bows and arrows, they specify in firearms. So those are the main classes that I play with, and kind of my take on what they can do. on what they're good at. So consider what class you might be before you sit down to learn all the rules and go over everything. Consider what kind of a character you might want to be. Do you want to be more combat oriented? Do you want to have more utility? Do you want to be a caster? Do you want to stay away from magic? Those are the kind of things, do you want to have a character that's, I'm happy sometimes and the rest of the time I'm really angry and I'm a barbarian? You can be all kinds of things. So I've had a human noble lady that was basically Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Her father was a tinkerer. So she became a tinkerer, but she also went to adventure. I had a lot of fun with that one. I have currently a fighter that's also like the mother of the group. She was brought up in a rough situation and taught to fight, and then escaped when she could. And she made her friends her family, and now she protects them. But, my utility is I have a couple of tools, and that's what she does. I was a sorcerer in a school once, a little gnome sorcerer that had this storm magic that was interesting and strange and scared her a little bit, but because it came from within her. Think about these things, and the other thing to consider is going to be your race and your background. What kind of combination do you want? You don't have to be solid set on it, but have kind of this idea of the type of character you want, and then you can pick race and class that fit into that idea.